Today I've got a little story for you. I've been thinking a lot about history lately and the rise and fall of different societies, and I know that that seems like a history lesson, but really, it's that old statement of those that do not understand history are doomed to repeat it, which means countries and civilizations rise and fall. And it's my hope that America continues to get stronger and better. And if you listen to me at all, I think that that starts with like a great education, right? But I want to tell you a story and this is a true story, by the way. Okay. And it's a story about how societies and countries weaken themselves. And it's never in just one dramatic moment. It's always in little baby steps. All right. And if you've ever heard the analogy about how do you boil a frog? Well, if you throw a frog in a pot of water, boiling water, it'll jump out because it's hot and it's boiling. But if you put a frog in warm water and you slowly turn it up to boil, the frog doesn't notice it and it gets boiled to death. And so the analogy is slowly things happen. So today we're going to talk about Iran. And I thought I would do it as a lesson about one particular girl and some like almost diaries that I kind of located about her. And then I was thinking about my own daughter. I was raised by strong women, only women really. And I got this beautiful young daughter and not young anymore. She's in college, but I think a lot about that. And I think about that effect. So let's get into it. Let's have a little story. So let's talk about Leah. And at the time, Leah, at the start of the story, Leah's about 11 years old, and Leah is really smart, like in the ways that make certain adults uncomfortable. And she likes science, and she likes talking about science, and she likes taking apart like her radio, and she loves to ask questions like why, which are such great questions because she's going to learn so much when she asks questions. And then one day, her mother tells her quietly, Leah, you can't take that book to school. And of course Leah goes, well, why? It's not a violent book. It's not obscene. And it was because the book was about a girl scientist who solves problems by herself. That was the type of book it was. And so we're really talking about Iran in around 1979. Now, I was alive in 1979, so we're not talking about ancient history here, right? And in 1979, the Islamic Revolution, takes complete control, and Iran's new leadership, the new government, said that schools and universities had to become Islamic and loyal. I didn't really describe what loyal meant, but Islam, you had a lot of, hundreds, many centuries of Islamic rules to go over, but loyal. Well, loyal to what? Not loyal to learning, not loyal to growth, but loyal to the new leadership. So just kind of keep that in mind. So what they did is they created this thing called the Cultural Revolutionary Headquarters. Sounds very cultural revolutionary headquarters. All right. Sounds a little innocuous, right? And this later got turned into the Supreme Council of Cultural Revolution, right? And the supreme leader, aka the president or the dictator or the king, but in this case it was the supreme leader, gave this group, the Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution, authority in 1980. So, fast forward a year, to make education, to remake education so that every subject from engineering to the humanities aligned with this new Islamic State's ideology and the loyalty stuff. So universities were, the claim was, we're going to shut the universities down temporarily. And they did this in 1980, and they stayed closed for several years so they could specifically purge things from the curriculum, mainly Western and non-Islamic influences, but that's what this particular country did. And they had to rewrite their curriculum. So this took a couple years. And then you got to remove professors. You got to remove professors because they're going to teach all these other subjects that are not what we want you to teach. And any students that were considered disloyal, well, we're not going to educate them. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So the shutdown was not marked as we're trying to kill education. No. It was marked as we're going to clean up education. We're going to make education better. So in the early 1980s, they said we're going to make education better. We're going to clean it up and we're going to protect our culture. And in June of 1980, this council set out these really set standards. They set to overhaul guidelines for universities based on all these cultural principles, and they started kicking out people. And this was really the first move of control in Iran. And so then what happened was, if they didn't start burning books. You don't have to burn a school if you can rewrite what the school does and what it's allowed to teach and who's allowed to teach it, right? So little Leah doesn't know anything about this history. She just knows that her library at school quietly stops carrying certain books. Books with girls who talk back, girls who build things, girls who leave homes, girls who want to argue or question things. All those books just kind of disappear. There is an interesting parallel going on in the United States to this right now. I digress a little bit. Is what's going on at the Navy, the Indianapolis. They just got a bunch of books removed from their library, but I'm gonna get back to that maybe later. But they had books removed. So we're just going to remove things that we don't like. Okay, so these stories of these books that were just disappeared overnight were labeled as not aligned with our values, right? So the message to the teachers is assign something else if you want to keep your job. I'm sorry, I got to talk about what's going on in Annapolis just a little bit, because a speaker was set to go there and they told him he couldn't talk about certain subjects. I mean, really? I thought school and college was supposed to be about everything. There are a lot of bad books out there. There's a lot of garbage books. There's a lot of books that are just trash. They're not interesting. They're not good. They're not well written, or they're about garbage. But once we hide people from that, then the slippery slope happens. And then you start to ban books of, girls that question things or girls that are interested in science. And so think about what's going on right here in the United States right now. So it doesn't really start with no school. It starts with not that book, not that course, not that class. So Leah now, she's like 13 years old. It's a couple years later, and the control, it's still subtle, but it's less subtle now. Because now Iran has built this education system around political loyalty, and they start to add gender rules, because that's a good way to control it. So after the revolution, schools and universities were explicitly restructured to produce these Islamic citizens, not independent thinkers, and gender segregation was enforced, right? So co-ed spaces were eliminated, mandatory dress codes for girls were imposed, starting in childhood. So now, before this, women could drive, girls could wear what they wanted, boys could wear what they wanted, but not anymore. So we started taking away some books. Now we're going to start kind of telling you what to wear. This didn't happen overnight. This was in little steps, right? So mandatory dress codes for girls and Islamic ideology courses were inserted into everything, even like engineering classes, like math classes, right? So students and teachers who didn't comply were just gone. So you either get in with the program or you're gone. The whole, you're with me or you're against me. I think that came out of Star Wars. I mean, I know there was before, but you're with me or you're against me. How dare you question anything that I have to say? All right. So this is really important, because this wasn't just social pressure. This was the Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution was empowered, like by decree, to control curriculum and hiring. All right. So its decisions, this council, were treated as binding policy, like a law that for all schools and universities across the country. And it took a couple years to get there. So when our teacher tells Leah, we're not covering this unit this year, the science class, what the teacher actually means is, if I cover that course, I'm going to be reported and I'm going to be gone. So we're not doing that anymore, right? We're not allowed to question a demand. So Leah is technically in school still at this point. She's getting an education. So it's not like overnight the girls were barred from education and told what to dress. And remember, we started with, we lose a few books. Then we're going to tell you what to dress like. And this is not fiction. This is not the book 1984, but it sure does seem it, right? George Orwell, 1984, you should read it, is she's still receiving an education, right? So you can't say she's not getting an education. You can't say she's not allowed to go to school. She is. But we've really restructured what you can learn and how you can learn. Any parallels going on? All right. So let's fast forward another year. Leah's now, she's 14 years old. So it's been 3 years or so, and Leah starts thinking about what she wants to study after high school because as a young girl, prior to 1979, maybe she wanted to become a scientist or a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or something. But this is when the second move hits, the gatekeeping of the future. We're going to start to put up boundaries and borders on what people can study long-term and who can have what type of jobs, right? So Iran's Ministry of Science and Technology, it says the word science and technology, so I think it's about science and technology, but I'm a sucker, right? Is the Ministry of Science and Technology that oversees higher education publishes a national admissions manual every year now. And so I'm going to jump forward to like 2012. I thought this was interesting. The manual revealed in 2012 that 36 public universities had declared 77 majors off limits to women. So you go from 1980 to 2012. That's in your lifespan. That's like in one person's lifespan, right? What was it 20, 30, 20 years, 30? It's about 30 years. Sorry, I'm doing math in my head. In 30 years, they banned 77 jobs, like careers in science and technology for women. Entire fields, engineering, oil industry studies, really important to Iran, by the way, the oil industry. That's how they make their money. Some science and technology programs, and they were relabeled single gender, men only programs. Okay. Universities said women were not permitted to enroll. So this is the gatekeeping function. You're just barred from it. So you're barred from receiving any kind of education now, especially higher level. And you've been indoctrinated now for 20 or 30 years. And this wasn't a rumor. This was actual policy. And it was the official entrance guidance for all universities. And it was justified with language, and I wrote this down. It was, these careers are not appropriate for women. All right. And there's no employer demand for female graduates. Sounds like propaganda to me, right? No demand for female graduates. We don't want female doctors and female nurses and female CPAs and I never heard of it. Okay, but it's not appropriate for women. So don't read this, don't study that, dress this way. Okay, so Leah can go to school now. Remember, it's not this whole overnight, you're banned from getting an education. No. Leah can still go to school. So if you're arguing that women are banned from education, Iran said, what are you talking about? She just can't go and get these degrees. But she could go to get something else, but just not an engineering degree, not a mining engineering degree. No, not certain science and technical tracks off limits, but she could do something else. Even some counseling and education programs, by the way, were also declared male only. All right. And so the government message sounds like really calm to Leah, and it sounds calm to people. And so, that we're slowly turning up that boiling water, and we slowly turning it up. It just sounds calm. We're not banning women from education. We're aligning majors with society needs. So we're going to align the degrees with what society needs and wants, according to the man, the supreme leader, or whatever his thoughts are, right? So this is what it looks like when a government breaks the social contract I was talking about a couple of weeks ago. When you break a social contract on education, not by saying no girls in school, but by quietly shrinking where women are allowed to go to school, what they're allowed to be taught, and what they're allowed to read. Well, you're on razor's edge here. You're absolutely banning them from education, but not at all. So it's a real technical little BS argument. Okay, so now at 15, so about 4 years into this little journey, Leah stops feeling safe. All right, and girls' schools across Iran reported wave after wave of suspected poisoning, gas attacks. And this goes all the way up into 2022 and 2023, by the way. And so Leah, is in school, and there was a suspected poisoning. There's a gas attack. Schools exited out. So thousands of schoolgirls across dozens and even like hundreds of schools suddenly couldn't breathe, felt dizzy, numb, and were hospitalized in a very short period of time. Parents were terrified. This was an attempt to scare girls out of classrooms. Well, of course it was. I'm not sending my little girl 15 back to a school where she's going to get poisoned because she's trying to learn. Now, of course, Iranian officials, that's not true. They downplayed it as stress and in many cases failed to hold anyone accountable for any of these things. I mean, did they set it up? Did they not care? They certainly didn't make the girls feel safe in school because I don't care if they go to school or not, according to the Supreme Leader. So human rights groups, across, and this was as early as 22, 23 still going on, is human rights groups warned openly that these attacks looked coordinated and that the families were pulling daughters out of school just to keep them alive. Well, makes sense to me, right? So it's like a parent thinking, if I send my daughter to 8th grade today, will she come home coughing blood, right? Because that is what parents in Iran were actually asking out loud. And in the United States, we had some of these issues. Jim Crow laws, segregation, 1950s. I mean, we're not immune to this just because we're a Western society. We're not immune to coordinated attacks to try to drive people out of an education system or to stop them coming into an education system. We have our own history that we're trying to redeem and work through to become better at. Okay, but now we get to Leah. She's 16 now, right? And Leah understands the truth now. Most adults would never say in Iran. She knows that her government does not trust her mind. She's aware. She knows that women teachers in her school have quietly disappeared. They're gone now after being accused of improper influence, improper dress. That's why you control what they wear so that you can say they didn't do it. And she knows that what she wears, her hair, her clothing, what she thinks even behind closed doors is now a legal weapon that the state's going to use against her. Because here's the next layer of law. Okay? Iran begins to enforce compulsory hijabs, the full coloring, for girls and women, including in schools. And that has been part of the post-1979 system. Right? So full covering head to toe wasn't like that prior to the revolution. Okay? This is not like, I had somebody that said, well, that's just the way that society is. And I go, no. That's the way the society has been since 1979. Not for the last 500 years or 1,000 years of history. Since 1979. All right. So I get so frustrated sometimes, right? Sorry. So we're all the way back as recently as 2023 and 2024, Parliament advanced and then approved of the hijabs and chastity laws. All right. They were formerly called these laws to support the family. Wait, let me read this to get it right. It was formerly called the law to support the family by promoting the culture of chastity and hijabs. Okay. It dramatically increased penalties for women and girls who don't comply with these strict dress laws. Huge fines, criminal charges, and prison sentences, surveillance, Big Brother, right? And even the possibility of charges as serious as corruption on the earth. I got to go back and look that one up. Corruption on the earth, all right? Which in Iran's legal system, it carries the death penalty. So they could die by not complying. We have the First Amendment. We're it. Other countries have some freedom of speech and some things like that, but they don't have an amendment in their constitution, most of them. So don't confuse that. We've got it. We don't want to lose it. All right. So now at 16, at a 16-year-old girl, if you show a strand of hair, if you ask a hard question in your class, if you raise your hand, you ask a hard question. If you sit in a chemistry room that maybe was gas last month, by the way, and nobody's going to tell you why, and you're supposed to believe that you have a future in the system. That's Leah's world. That is a modern day government on the planet right now. And it changed since 79. 40 years, give or take. 45 years, give or take. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little cold. And I'm not doing it on purpose. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that is tragic for girls over there, but I just care about my own kid here, I need you to hear the cost calculation, all right? When Iran shut down universities to purge un-Islamic thinking, it didn't just silence dissent. It's cutting off supplies of scientists, doctors, engineers, teachers, the exact people that you need to run a modern country. If you want a modern country and you want to have a nice house and you want to have electricity turn on, you want your lights to go on consistently. I'm dead serious. We in America are so spoiled when it comes to electricity. We had to switch it. If it doesn't go on, we lose our minds. The power should run consistently in many countries around the nation. It's not true because they don't have the people with the skills and the education necessary to keep those systems running. And that can happen here. It happens in some cities in America right now. We just don't have talented people that know how to keep things running. So when you get rid of all these people, you can't have a modern country. So the Cultural Revolution literally removed professors. It rewrote curriculum to enforce this ideology of loyalty. It screened students that kicked them out, and now they're suffering the consequences. So when Iran told women, you're banned from 77 majors, it didn't just limit women, by the way. So, well, I'm a man. I'm not, whatever they do to women, I'm a man. It shrank the entire future of the workforce. Oil industry is important to them. Infrastructure, engineering, agriculture, industrial design, counseling, how we build buildings that don't fall in on a little earthquake or whatever. And when a country scares girls out of school with mass poisoning that authorities downplay instead of stopping, you don't just traumatize the girls. You damage the health of all society and public safety, long-term economic output, which affects everybody in the entire society. And now you see the repercussions of what's going on in Iran. Not a great country, not something that you're like, I want to move there because it's awesome and I can have great healthcare and great, hobbies and vacation, make a good living. So when half your talent pool is either controlled or intimidated or pushed out, you're going to get exactly what you'd expect. Fewer of every good thing that you need. Now, this isn't abstract. The crime rates go up. Economic stagnation, medical shortages, political instability. And you're in wars with everybody, battles for everybody because you got to hold your power if you're the supreme leader. I've been talking about this social contract, and it's not charity, guys. It's not charity, girls, ladies, men. When I say guys, I got in trouble once. I was speaking. I go, come on, guys. And somebody goes, I'm a woman. Man, it's just a term. Like, dude, we can all be guys. We can all be dudes. We can all be girls. I don't know. Sorry about that. I'm not trying to be offensive, but people want to get offended sometimes. I don't know. You can yell at me later. So people instead of guys, we talk about this social contract, and it's not about just being nice to others, and that is a good reason to do it. But I want you to ask you, be a little selfish, because if we lose great education, Iran is a real warning label of what happens. The government decides what ideas are acceptable. This stunts schools and purges good teachers. Are we having a teacher shortage in the United States? Are we purging good teachers right now? We banning books? Yeah, we are banning books. That is true. And there's some awful books I don't want to read. I get it. I don't know if I want to stop somebody else from reading them. Why would I want to do that? I'd like to have them read it and then think about it and then read a better book and then have stronger opinions, right? I mean, if you read one book and you're completely manipulated by that book, man, you ain't that bright either way. You need to read a bunch of books. So I'm not really afraid of a person reading a book and going off the reservation, so to speak. But if the government decides which children get full access and which don't, and then they start to close the door of higher education to people, society in general is going to be affected. And I'm going to go back to vouchers again, right? Vouchers is absolutely the government deciding which children get full access and which ones they don't. It's not male and female right now, but it certainly is socioeconomic. It is demographics and location too. But yeah, the government's choosing. If the government then tolerates or fails to stop fear tactics that make some schools physically dangerous for any group of people, you're stunting their ability to become great members of society. All those individuals are going to suffer, and you as a good member of society will suffer with them. Somebody is going to be paying for them for the rest of their lives. Maybe they're in prison. Maybe they're on welfare. Maybe they just don't live up to the full potential they could have had we provided them an awesome education. So the end result is Iran didn't just silence the girls. They literally starved their own future workforce, their own hospitals, their own streets, their own stability. Leah's not just a victim in this story. She's the early warning system, right? So when countries decide that we don't owe kids a full education, the country as a whole pays for it. Always. Not just morally, but economically, socially, in safety and quality of life. We're all going to pay for the repercussions of our actions on how we're treating public education right now in the United States. And Iran is a modern example of what we should be thinking about and addressing. All right, we got lots of work to do, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye.